What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's finally here, Daytona 500 weekend, the biggest race of the season, and we have a million maker over on DraftKings, $1 million to first, and 100K to first over on FanDuel. Tons of props on Prize Picks, Underdog, you name it. Gonna be an exciting weekend, and I can't wait. But anyway, if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Chris Pennell. I break down NASCAR DFS each and every single week on this channel. You can also find me live on Sunday mornings, breaking down the entire slate and answering any questions you guys or gals may end up having. Highly recommend you be in there because I'd love to see you. And what I like to do here in these videos is I go over the strategy portion of the track first. Do not skip that part. I know it might not be as exciting, but it's very important, especially for a track like this. Then we go driver by driver, breaking down the entire slate. And then I say adios, and I'll see you on the live stream. And hey, if that all sounds fine and dandy to you, look, give me one small thing in return. Leaving a like on the video, subscribing to the channel if you are new, and feel free to leave a comment down below, being nice, being mean. I don't really care either way, but I'd love to hear from you. And I would like to set a goal here, so if we can get over 300 likes for this video, I'd truly appreciate it. And really quick, let me pay the bills here. I'm sure you can understand, but as of right now, if you are a new user over on Prize Picks or Underdog, you can use promo code CPEN to get an instant deposit match bonus up to $100. No strings attached. It is free money. Please use that to your advantage. You can use the link down below in the description or the pinned comment, or head over to prizepicks.com or Underdog and make sure you use promo code CPEN when you deposit. And I would tell you right now, Prize Picks from the Clash and the Duels, they've had some really bad lines for their NASCAR props, which bad for them, good for us. We've definitely taken advantage of that so far. So if that continues throughout the season, I definitely think we have a nice edge here. Underdog has yet to post anything, but I'll let you guys know when they do. But I do have projections for Prize Picks on the spreadsheet if you ever want to check those out and make it easier on yourself. All right, so moving on to the strategy portion of this video, which is incredibly important this week because Daytona is all about strategy. I'll tell you right now, just being 100% honest straight off the bat, no one can predict this race, not even myself. If anyone tells you they can, they are straight up lying to you. But the one thing you can do to set yourself up for success this weekend is being able to predict what the field is going to do and use that to your advantage, which is something I think I am pretty good at. And that's where things like ownership projections, leverage scores, and things like that come into play. Because if the field's going one way, usually the best thing to do at Daytona is go the other way. So zig when other people zag, or zag when other people zig. And when I run my simulations in my model this weekend, which you guys can get access to, it'll show you the projected ownership, my optimal percentages, and show you the best leverage scores, which is something I think are very important at Daytona. And we'll kind of get into that when we talk driver by driver, because there are specific things I do want to point out. But if you are building lineups for Daytona, you have to assume it's going to be a wreck fest. This is what happens each and every single Daytona 500. If you're wondering what that may be, it's because at a track like this, used to be restrictor plates, and that's not the case anymore. But if you hear me refer to it as a plate track, that's what I mean. It's just because they're going to be all in a big pack, and one small error, one aggressive block or something like that can take out the entire field. If you guys watched the dual race for the second one, we saw Kyle Busch up front, Daniel Suarez turned him, and then Kyle Busch got turned into the wall and takes out a couple of cars, and that's pretty tame. I mean, we're probably going to see close to half the field be involved in wrecks. Probably, maybe not just involved in wrecks, but you could see half the field be out. I mean, if you guys watched the last Daytona race last year for the summer, I mean, it was like just a few cars left by the end. That's when we saw all the scrubs be in the top 10. So we have to assume the worst here at Daytona. So what that means is avoiding drivers that are starting close to the front. I want to play drivers that are starting closer to the back. And I don't really care what the driver name is. It all just comes down to the starting position, because pretty much everyone's in equal equipment at a track like this. Maybe not Connor Daly, because that car is barely being held together right now. But for the most part, you know, big names in the back tend to be overowned when drivers that are starting spots right next to them have very similar upside and almost are sometimes safer because they're not going to be riding around up front like a guy like Kyle Busch this weekend. So for me, when I'm building lineups, I usually have a set group in my optimizer, which you can use if you do have access to it. Links down below in the description for that. But I set a group up, or I set 3 groups up, I should say. So I usually want 0 to 2 drivers starting 1st through 12th, 0 to 4 drivers starting 13th through 24th, then 25th on back. I pretty much want 3 to 4 to 6 drivers in all of my lineups. And the reason we do that is because there's so much carnage. We want the drivers starting in the back because they offer the highest floors, and at the same time, they offer us the highest ceilings as well. Like we have Alex Bowman in the pool. He's pretty much by far the worst play on the slate. Yes, he's starting first. Yes, he has a fast car, but pretty decent chance he gets caught up in a wreck. And if he's one of the first guys that gets wrecked out, which I have on my heat map, which for example, it shows you how many points they get for where they finish throughout the entire field. It's actually quite aesthetic looking, but he can get close to negative 40 points. Meanwhile, if the guy starting 36 happens to wreck out first, he's barely killing it because he's only got a couple of negative points, which is by far better than Alex Bowman if he happens to finish, like, say, 26, 27. So Everyone likes to say stack the back, which is pretty much what you're doing, but you can still roster drivers starting closer to the front, but you have to be mindful of your entire roster construction and trying to stay away from an overly chalky lineup, because usually the high-owned plays are typically not the best ways to go at a track like this. And one other thing to keep in mind is that salary means absolutely nothing here. I mean, the FanDuel optimal lineup at the last Daytona race, I want to say it was like BJ McLeod and just a bunch of other drivers that were like 2 and 3K. You can leave as much money on the table as you want. I've seen a Daytona race on DraftKings where like only like $30,000 of the salary was used. That's like 20K on the table. So do not care about the salary you're using. If you are getting close to maxing out your salary at $50,000, I'll tell you right now, it's probably not a good lineup. If you like your lineups, they're bad. If you don't like your lineups, that's probably the best way to go about it. And a lot of casual players this weekend, especially in the Millie Maker, are going to be playing these big names, trying to max out their salary. So just leaving money on the table is a good way to get different as well. All right, so moving on to the driver by driver breakdown portion here, I do have to mention a couple of things first. So first off, if you want to join the best NASCAR DFS community out there, which I know it's easy for me to say, but I'm hoping a lot of people can back me up on that. And you guys make it what it is, so I do appreciate you all being awesome. But I completely revamped the way I do things this year. New ways of doing the DraftKings, FanDuel, and Prize Picks projections. I'll see if I can get anything up for Underdog, but they were a new sponsor, so I didn't have a lot of time to get that ready. I changed the way I do simulation scores, which basically projects everything out so you can see the top win percentages, top dominator tools, laps led, fast laps, and projected finish, all that fun stuff, which is nice and laid out, easy to read for you all. I also have my optimal percentages on there versus the projected ownership, so it spits out the best leverage plays on each slate. I now have added betting on there, which my implied odds to win compared to Vegas. You can find the best leverage there. And pit stop data, all that fun stuff, it's all there in the spreadsheet. And obviously I have my awesome Discord community, which we are in there 24/7. And a little treat to you all, I did create a free Discord. I'm obviously going to be in the premium one as much as possible, but if anyone ever has any questions they want to shoot me, you can reach out to me on Discord. I'll drop the link down below if you want to join the free one there. And if there's other people in there that want to talk, you can ask them questions as well and bounce ideas off each other on race day or just throughout the week. And then, of course, I do have my article I do for cash in tournaments. And then the optimizer, which I personally use, has all my projections on there, ownership, you can set all the rules you want. I do have tutorials for everything on how to read the model and the optimizer as well. All right, so let's go driver by driver now. Sorry for the long commercial, but first race of the year, so you know how it is. I do apologize. But let's start with the 10K and up drivers, and we got Chase Elliott up top on DK, $10,400, 12K flat over on FanDuel. He is starting in 8th, tied for the second best odds with the Penske boys, Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano, only behind teammate Kyle Larson. Which if you are betting Kyle Larson to win this race as the favorite, terrible bet, terrible. Even if he wins, sure, congrats. But man, I could not imagine betting Kyle Larson as a favorite at a plate track because its history is not on your side. I will tell you that right now. But as far as Elliott is concerned, he's one of those guys where, yes, he's starting in the top 10. If I have my optimizer out and I'm setting up groups, I want 0 to 2 drivers starting inside the top 12. A lot of times it's 0 drivers. It's hardly ever 2. But if Elliott is going to be in the optimal, he basically has to win the race starting in 8th. Like, I don't think you guys understand how risky it is rostering drivers this far up front. Like, they have absolutely, like, 0 floor. They have to be almost perfect up here, especially if you're in the top. If you're in the top 5, you got to win pretty much. And I believe one year we saw Stenhouse start in the pole. He won the race, and he was still not in the optimal. So you have to have a lot go your way to be starting close to the front and be in the optimal lineup. Now, if you're starting in 8th and you win the race, yeah, you're more than likely going to be in the optimal. So I will have some shares of Chase Elliott, and he is one of the best plate track drivers. I mean, we can pull up the stats. Kind of a waste of time just looking at stats because it's such a random race. But I can pull up the past 10 races at super speedways for you guys. And obviously Elliott is one of the best. I believe he does have the best average finish the past 10 races, the best running position, has 2 wins. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it'd be crazy or anything if Chase Elliott wins. I'm still giving him like under a 6 or 7% chance to win, but compared to everybody else, that's not that bad. So I don't mind taking some stabs in tournaments, but absolutely not in cash games. Denny Hamlin, $10,300. He's starting in 18th. He's got multiple wins at Daytona, one of the best plate track drivers out there. He's starting in 18, so it makes him an interesting tournament play. If some people are going to tout him for cash games, I think that's an awful idea. I would never play a big name driver starting middle of the pack in cash. There's just way too much downside there. Like, I would much rather play a guy like Jimmy Johnson or Ricky Stenhouse starting many spots further back than Denny Hamlin. He's interesting for tournaments because he has race winning upside, top 5 upside, and if he does that, that's a pretty good play starting in 18th. But there's also a lot of risk there as well. Like, yes, he is one of the best drivers at Daytona. As you can see, the most laps led here the past several seasons, has a win 3 top 5s. And I believe one year at the 4 plate tracks, he went like an average finish of like 2.4, then the next year he just crashes a bunch. Just lots of variance. If he's going to be high owned starting 18th, which I have not yet read my ownership projections, so I'm kind of just talking in general here. I don't know the exact numbers, what they're going to be yet. But I do think Hamlin might be a little bit over-owned just because of his name. Ryan Blaney, starting in 7th, dominated the first portion of the dual race, and then pit stop wasn't the greatest. Joey Logano got out front. He dominated the rest. But I would not be surprised if one of the 2 Penske cars won. I mean, there's a reason these guys are the most expensive drivers, because they are the best super speedway drivers, so it makes sense. But all very risky plays here. Blaney, I prefer him over Logano because he's starting a few spots further back, and if he does win the race starting in 7th, yeah, we'll probably see him in the optimal. But again, chances are, the chances are for anybody, they're not going to win this race. Like, everyone's like almost below 6% for me to win. So you got to make sure you factor that into your exposures and not to go crazy on any of these guys, because they're going to be overowned. They're big names. Everyone recognizes them at Daytona, so you have to be careful with their ownership. I would definitely be underweight. And Joey Logano, extremely risky play. If you are playing Joey, you are projecting him to win. And honestly, I have him at around like a 5 or 6% chance to win. I forget the exact number, which that probably needs to reflect in my exposures, because if Joey is going to be over 10% owned, that's a horrible play and something I'm definitely going to be underweight on. Dropping down to the 9K range, Kyle Larson, $9,900, $10K on FanDuel, the favorite to win this race, which is kind of crazy to me, starting on the front row with his teammate William Byron. We know that Hendrick always kills qualifying, but yeah, the super speedways have not been too kind for Larson. If you're looking at Daytona specifically, average finish of 22nd, averaging 5.3 DraftKings points per race, and that's just because he starts close to the front almost every single time, and when you get caught up in wrecks, it's just going to absolutely kill you. So I'm going to have 0% Larson. If you're looking at the past 10 races, super speedways, 3.2 DraftKings points per race, averaging 24th average place finish, and just overall not good. I mean, if you're playing Larson, he has to win. There's no way around it, and even then, there's not a guarantees in the optimal, so I will have absolutely 0% Larson. He was high owned on the pole in the second dual race, so if he's going to be high owned once again, you should be thinking... You should be very thankful, because those people are helping pay the rig. And a lot of casuals are going to see Kyle Larson. They know he's a good driver, which yes, he is. He's probably the best driver in the field. But a super speedway starting in the front row, no thank you. That is terrible ownership, and we see it each and every single season. William Byron, $9,700. He's starting in 21st. I would much rather play Byron. I know he has a lot of bad luck at super speedways, but when he's not wrecking, he's running near the front. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Byron run this race. So yeah, I think Byron's a fine tournament play, but I would not play him in cash games. Starting in 21st, that's mid-pack. There's still a lot of danger. Not a cash game play for me, but I will play him in tournaments. And the driver that everyone is going to be talking about this weekend, which I think is up for some pretty good discussion here, Kyle Busch, $9,600 on DraftKings. He is starting in 36 after getting turned by Daniel Suarez. Going to be going up to a backup car. Doesn't mean anything to me. But the question here is, how much Kyle Busch is too much Kyle Busch? I had to run my simulations to see if he's going to be over-owned or under-owned, whatever it may be. My assumption is right now he's going to get close to 50-60% ownership in the Mealy Maker, and that's a lot of ownership for a driver that's got an equal chance of anybody to wreck out. So I'm probably going to take an underweight approach, and that's not me saying Kyle Busch is a bad play. Projection-wise, he is by far the best play. I ran my optimizer earlier, and he popped in every single lineup without any groups or randomness or anything like that. But yeah, he's the best play on the slate. If he does not wreck, he will more than likely be optimal. So don't think I'm saying to cross Kyle Busch off your list. I'm just saying if he happens to get caught up in a wreck and he finishes, say, 27th or something, you have some insane leverage on the field. And if you just bypass Kyle Busch, you could play the guys that are starting right around him as pivots. I know Jimmy Johnson's going to be chalky, but a Chase Briscoe starting 30th, a Ricky Stenhouse starting 31st, and Allmendinger starting 29th. Like, they're very similar plays to Kyle Busch, but they're not going to have near the ownership because the name isn't as big. So be careful with Kyle Busch. He does have a lot of bad luck at Daytona. He typically runs pretty well, but then he just gets caught up in the mess. So if you're a tournament player like me, you're probably hoping he wrecks out early and we can get some nice leverage. I'm not saying I'm fading Kyle Busch. I'm going to play a large chunk of him. For example, let's say he's 60% owned, but Sims think he's only going to be optimal around 45%. I'll probably play around 45%, knowing I'm underweight, but I'll still have enough to where if he does do good, I'll still have some live lineups for sure. If you were playing cash games, he's a 100% lock, no way around it. But in tournaments, just be careful because playing high ownership plays at Daytona is usually not a great way to get different or take down tournaments. And we did have the Mealy Maker winner last year in my Discord, Sean, and he can tell you all about that because Denny Hamlin was chalk last year, insanely high owned starting in the back.
He went underweight, very similar situation, and guess what? Denny ends up wrecking out, and he wins $1 million. So take some advice from him if you want. Bubba Wallace, $9,400. He's starting in 15th. Looked pretty strong early on in that dual race, and that doesn't really mean anything, but we know Bubba is one of the best super speedway drivers in all of NASCAR. I know he doesn't have quite the name value of some of these other guys, but I mean, the numbers speak for themselves at Daytona. 8.8 average finish, 3 top 5s the past 6 races, nearly 50 DraftKings points per race. I do think he's a good tournament play, kind of in a similar boat to William Byron and Denny Hamlin. Ross Chastain, $9,200. He's starting in 23rd. Pretty good at super speedways. A lot of these numbers were when he was in bad equipment, but last year we saw him right up front. He won Talladega. I was right up there with Chase Elliott at Atlanta. I believe it was the first Atlanta race, if I remember correctly. So starting in 23rd, pretty much the same play as William Byron, in my opinion. Just good guys to get exposure to because they have race winning upside and they offer some place differential. But again, not a cash game play. Tyler Reddick, $9,000. He is starting in 26th. Some pretty bad luck at super speedways. We'll look at the past 10 races for him. He's got an average finish of 24th, 9.2 DraftKings points per race, and only 1 top 5 to show for it. But starting back in 26, definitely going to be a solid place differential play. He's not as safe as some of these guys starting in the 30s, but the upside is certainly there. He's a fringe cash play for me. I know some people might think he's a cash game lock starting that far back, but there's still some spots he could certainly lose. But I do like him. Definitely have interest. Fringe cash interest, but definitely for tournaments. Dropping down to the 8K range, we have Brad Keselowski here, $8,800, 95 on FanDuel. He's starting in 10th. He was starting close to the front last year, and I believe he might have sneaked into the optimal because just about near won the race. We know Austin Cindric took it home. But he's one of those guys where, yes, he's starting in the top 10. He's very risky, but I want to get some exposures, just some slight percentage too, just because he's got a chance to win this race because we know he's a great super speedway driver, but he can be very hit or miss at super speedway, so you have to be careful with him. Christopher Bell, $8,600, who had an awesome move in that dual race, almost won it, was very close over Joey Logano. But he's starting in 5th. He's one of those guys where if he doesn't win the race, probably not in the optimal, and I'm giving him less than a 5% chance to win, so that has to reflect in my exposures. Martin Truex Jr., $8,400, a guy that we typically always avoid at super speedways, but last year hit a string of luck where had one of the best average finishes of them last season. We'll see if that keeps up this year, but starting in 16th, I wouldn't call him an extremely risky play. I wouldn't call him a super safe play either, just kind of right in the middle. And if he can sneak into the top 5, might be knocking on the door at optimal, but again, just kind of in a weird spot there where you're just playing him however much the opto gives you, but you're not really taking a strong stance on Truex. Cindric is about the same play as Christopher Bell, a guy that I'll probably have less than 5 to 6% of just because he's starting so close to the front, and the only way for him to be optimal is basically to win. But won the Daytona 500 last year. I don't know if he'll repeat that again, but we know the Penske cars are always strong at these track types, and Ford looked really good in that first dual race. Austin Dillon, $8,000, starting in 27th, a very similar play to Tyler Reddick, although Dillon has had a bit of a more favorable career so far at Daytona. He's won here before, 2 top 5s, actually won the most recent race at Daytona and won a Daytona 500 before as well, wrecking out Eric Almirola at the end. But Dillon's a really good place here starting in 27th, and I'd probably prefer him over Reddick in cash games. I'm not sure how the ownership will reflect on those two yet, but I think as of right now, I'll take Dillon over Reddick. Dropping down to the 7K range, we have Kevin Harvick, $7,800, which I guess if he wins this race, Busch is giving out $2 million. So if he does win, you probably have to sign up before. But make sure you sign up for that thing because, if he wins, you might as well take a shot at free money. But typically a guy that's not super exciting to play at super speedways because he never offers a ton of place differential. He's always in these kind of weird spots. But if he cracks the top 5 and could be knocking on the door at the win, you want him in your laps a little bit. I probably won't have more than 10% Harvick, but he might fall in that 5 to 10% range for me, just in case he just has a nice smooth race and avoids carnage. Major chalk play here, Jimmy Johnson, 7-time, $7,700, kind of fitting there. But he's starting in 39th, and his car is not terrible or anything. He's with Legacy Motor Club, which involves Noah Gragson and Eric Jones, so we know he's going to have a decent amount of speed. And if he just does not wreck in this race starting in 39th, he should be one of the best plays on the slate. Projection-wise, he grades out very well for me. And if you were playing cash games, he is a lock. But another thing to keep in mind, similar to Kyle Busch, Jimmy Johnson is a very popular name. There's going to be a lot of casuals. They're going to click on Jimmy Johnson's name. So just be very careful in tournaments. You can pivot to a guy like a Ty Gibbs down here, a Ty Dillon, Riley Herbst, who have very similar upside, but not quite the name value. So their ownership is not going to be nearly as high as Johnson. So again, similar boat to Kyle Busch. Fantastic play on paper, yes, but there is leverage to be had if you do go underweight in tournaments. But should be a very safe, solid play. Alex Bowman, I will have absolutely 0%. Even if he wins this race, it is not a guarantee he's in the optimal. It's just the 100 points don't really matter here. You can't generate fast laps consistently because everyone's drafting throughout the field. So I will have absolutely 0% Alex Bowman. If you want to play him, be my guest, but it's more than likely not going to work out. Chase Briscoe, $7,400. He's starting in 30th. Another guy that I think you can certainly play in cash games. Should be quite popular, but starting all the way back in 30th, you just kind of have to avoid wrecks, and it'll be a pretty good play. Daniel Suarez, $7,200. He's starting in 24th. I think he wrecks out of almost every Daytona race, it seems like. He already wrecked out Kyle Busch to start the season here. But starting in 24th, he's the guy you have to get some exposure to just because the place differential upside is there. Chris Buescher, $7,100. You can kind of throw him in that Brad Keselowski kind of category where, yeah, I'd say he's got a chance to win this race. It's not huge, but he's a guy that I'm probably going to have like 5 to 7% of just because we know he's a good plate racer. And he's got a couple of top fives here at Daytona. And if you're looking at the past 10 races at super speedways, recently he's had a string of bad luck, but still has 3 top 10s and top 5 to his name. And Buescher definitely has upside. Finished 4th in his first dual race. Dropping down to the 6K range, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., another guy that seems to wreck out of every single super speedway race. One of the best drivers at them. If you're looking at the average running position, it's better than most of these drivers here of 13th. I mean, next guy we see is Austin Cindric with a small sample size, but a guy like Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, the only ones that have better average running position than Ricky Stenhouse at Daytona, but he has not one top 15 to show for it the past few seasons. He's just really aggressive and he tends to wreck out a lot, so if you're rostering Stenhouse, expect the worst, but the upside is there for him if he can keep his nose clean, which is no easy task for him. Then we have Ryan Preece filling in for Cole Custer this season, which thankfully, because I hate Cole Custer, definitely think Preece has a lot more upside. But starting in 20th, I mean, he's like right in the middle of the pack here, so a lot of risk, but decent amount of reward too. I think Preece could be a top 10 contender, but just know there's a lot of risk there starting middle of the pack. Eric Jones, $6,600. He's starting in 25th. I actually think this is one of the better tournament plays, because last year at the Super Speedways, he had one of the best average running positions, ran very well at these tracks, and we know he's a good Super Speedway driver. He has won at Daytona before. Starting in 25th, he's not an extreme place differential play, but he is in the back half, and he doesn't have quite the name, so I don't think the ownership will be too crazy. So I'm hoping to see Eric Jones pop as one of the better leverage plays here, but I'll have to wait and see on ownership. But I do think Jones will pop in tournaments. Michael McDowell is a very similar play to Chris Buescher. Both these guys are just rock solid, consistent at Super Speedways. Michael McDowell, 4 top 15s, 2 top 10s, and a win at Daytona a couple seasons ago where he won the 500. But if you're playing McDowell, you kind of need him to be in that top 3 for the most part. But there's a chance it happens. It's not likely, which will keep my ownership down. But I will have some exposure to Michael McDowell. Noah Gragson starting in 22nd. Pretty much similar play to Ryan Preece. It's just the upside's not as high as some others. Starting middle of the pack. They're going to be lower owned. This is kind of like that dead zone where no one's going to play these guys. So if they do have success, you'll have some decent leverage. And he does have a top 5 at Daytona as well. Eric Almirola, he's starting in 4th. A risky play. You can kind of throw him in that top 5 where I just don't play guys in the top 5 really. I might throw a couple percentages on Bell and Eric Almirola just because they could win the race. But if I'm playing a single entry or 3 max or 20 max, I am not getting to them. AJ Allmendinger starting in 29th. Fine Super Speedway driver starting all the way in the back. Yeah, he's a fine PD play. Nothing else really to it. Ty Gibbs starting us off with the 5K range. I am wondering if DraftKings is going to have him this cheap all season long because so far through the Clash, the duels, and Daytona, they are just nuking his price point like he's not in a JGR car. I know that doesn't mean anything for this race, but I'm just saying like at Auto Club or something like that, if he's going to be in the 5K range, probably going to be pretty chalky. But starting all the way back in 33rd, yeah, fine cash play. I know it's a rookie, so it can always be a bit scary, but, did have experience in Cup last year. So, yeah, I'll be playing some Ty Gibbs starting at 33rd for sure. Justin Haley, similar play to his colleague teammate Adrian Allmendinger, just loading up on guys in the back. I have no problem with that. Corey LaJoie starting a bit too high for me. I know he's got upset at Super Speedways, but starting in 12th kind of kills his luster. I know he's very good at play tracks as far as just killing at DraftKings points-wise, but his success always comes from being in the back, and now he's starting 12th, so kind of kills that. Harrison Burton in 19th. He could be an interesting tournament play because if he can link up with his Penske teammates I should say. I mean, he's with Wood Brothers, but he's basically that 4th Penske car. But Logano, Blaney, and Austin Cindric, all guys that are powerhouses here and should be in contention for the win. If he can link up with them and sneak in like a top 8, it's not a bad play starting in 19th. Todd Gillen, those front row cars look pretty good yesterday. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a good run, but starting in 14th. The ownership's going to be pretty low, so if you want to get overweight, it probably won't take too much to do that. Zane Smith looked good as well, although, like I said, kind of in that same boat with the front row cars. Travis Pastrana, that's another guy that is interesting. We know the dirt bike guy. I didn't know much about him. I know he ran an Xfinity quite some time ago, but he's starting dead last and 40th. He's in a 2311 car, so the equipment's good. It's just the experience in the next gen car is not there. So that's the only concern there. But starting at 40th, you're going to have to get some exposure, because if there's a big one early on or just anything and he can pick up 10 to 12 spots, that's going to be big starting all the way back in 40th. So he has the highest floor of anybody here, but the only thing that I worry about is experience. But if he can just have a clean race and gain 10 to 15 spots, that's not bad. That drop into the 4K range, usually we just skip over these guys, but not here at Daytona. These guys are fine plays. Connor Daly, and he's pushing it here starting in 34th. His car is very unreliable with the money team in the 50 car. I don't know why it shows up 5 here, but I promise he's not in Kyle Larson's car. But yeah, that's he's only in here because Austin Hill got wrecked out. Other than that, Connor Daly should have got the boot. So the ownership will be very low. You can throw a couple of spare exchange exposures on him, but that's probably about it. Ty Dillon, $4,800. He's gonna be massive chalk. He's just really good at super speedways, keeping himself clean and being available at the end. I know he's in downgraded equipment this year in the 77 car, but again, equipment doesn't really matter too much. And if he can finish around 20th or 25th, that's a pretty good day. Starting in 37th, Riley Herbst in 38th. I know the equipment's not great for Rick Ware Racing, but we saw David Reagan do fine in this car before. I think David Reagan's obviously better at super speedways. But Herbst, I mean, if he just keeps it clean and there's massive carnage, I mean, these guys are great place differential plays, and they'll go on their own because no one likes playing these back marker cars. They like playing the big name place differential plays, but when it comes to the back markers, they tend to go overlooked, and this is where you can get some pretty good leverage. Cody Ware, $4,600, same boat as Herbst. Ty Dillon pretty much for the most part. And then BJ McLeod, I wish he was starting a little bit further back, but the ownership should be pretty low in McLeod. And if he can just keep it clean, I mean, he top 10 last year at Daytona, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. And just loading up on some of these guys, or at least going double the field on their projected ownership, is a good way to go at Daytona. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys for today's video. If you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Hope to see you all on the live on Sunday morning, probably around 11 a.m. Eastern. Hopefully to see you there. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you want to say hi, you can do that as well. But I wish you all the best of luck, and I will see you all Sunday.